Hi, my name is Angela Nicholson. I am a therapist. I'm also a psychic. I am also an educator. I am a channel for healing, and I have a business called Color of Kismet. You can find us at colorofkismet.com. I make essential oil blends that will radically change your life. We focus on alchemy, we focus on spiritual growth, enlightenment, helping you get to your awakening, however that is. And since emotional health there's a direct correlation between emotional health and spiritual growth, that's the way we do it. Please check us out. Mother's Day is coming up. There's all kinds of stuff coming up. We're all stuck at home, or many of us are stuck at home. You should check us out. There's a lot of stuff there. I wanted to talk a little bit today about finding ourselves doing old things, following old patterns. You may or may not have ever heard somebody say that, like, "Oh, that's old," or "That's an old thing. Don't do that." And you may or may not have known what that meant. When I say it to people, or when I say it about myself, what I mean is it's something that previously existed for you, for whatever reason, and you haven't done it in a while, or you don't do it often, or you don't think it often or say it often, and then all of a sudden it's sort of there. Why? you know, this happens a lot to people when they're going through shifting and changing and transitions, because as they're unraveling things and as they're creating new in their lives, what they're finding is that you kind of have to revisit some of the same issues, and sometimes you have to revisit them a lot. And that's just because there's a lot to learn around those things. They're, when we're challenged, when things are not easy, we find ourselves going back to those patterns because of the neural pathways. And we talked a little bit about this in another video, but the more that you do something the same way, the more that you get reinforcement that that's the way that works for you, the more then you'll do it that way. And the more you do it that way, the deeper the neuro pathway gets, and the more used to it you get, meaning things become easier if you just do it that way. Now, the trick is, of course, that things don't necessarily become easier down the way, but in the moment, that's what you go to. Old stuff also often will bring with it old feelings, old habits, old behaviors. Maybe you haven't found yourself feeling this particular way since college or since high school, or maybe you haven't reacted in that particular way since the 90s, or 5 years ago. Something, anyway, I'm sure by now, I could give you 1,000 examples, but I'm sure by now each of you has something in your mind that has come up since this challenging time that echoes with the old stuff. It might be something you've never stopped doing too. I don't want to rule out those. Some things we keep doing, it's just that we do it less, and so we don't see it as often. So pay attention to things that are causing trouble. If it's not causing trouble, if you're not feeling bad, or it's not causing trouble in your world, then I don't know that it's a problem. I'm sure that an argument could be made either way. But I really want to focus in on the things that are problems, the things that are not behooving us anymore. They're not helping us get along better with people. They're not helping us feel good about ourselves. They're not helping us overcome challenges. Those are the things that I want to focus on. Those are the things that come up when we're still. I've talked a lot about stillness over the years, about how really that's when healing comes, is when we allow ourselves to be still enough to receive it. Of course, in order to receive it, we have to examine it, the thing that is there that is not something we want to look at. If it was something we wanted to look at, we would have looked at it already. Okay? So if it's there and it's something that you're doing and it hasn't been examined before, it might have been, it was because at some point it was too scary to examine that, or you didn't maybe know how. And maybe now it is still scary. Maybe now you still don't know how. But that's why I'm here. Me and people, a lot of people like me, are sort of coming out of the woodwork because we're getting information, messages, however you want to say, that this is what we need to be doing, and this is how we need to be, coming forward for people to help give them a path out of whatever it is that they're in. And my knowledge and my world is around mental health and around spiritual growth, and so that's why I'm doing it this way. When we don't examine things that are causing problems, then what happens is they just keep causing problems. We can keep ignoring that. We can keep saying, well, I don't really want to talk about that because that doesn't feel good, so can you just not do that thing anymore that's going to make me feel bad? I get triggered around it. If I had a nickel for every single time I heard someone say, oh, well, we just don't do that anymore because I get triggered. Sometimes that's 100% valid. Most of the time I challenge people on that, because asking other people to accommodate you for whatever it is that is yours, that is not positive and that is sort of spilling out onto everybody, that's your responsibility to clean up. It's not everybody else's responsibility to tiptoe around. That is hard to hear, and that is hard to cope with in terms of figuring out then what to do. But I feel very strongly about that. I've worked with folks who have PTSD for 20 years. My focus and my expertise is in trauma, and I can tell you that your trauma, the things that have happened to you that have informed and impacted the way that you live your life, that's yours to clean up, and that's yours to understand, and it's yours to deal with, and it's not anybody else's. The error that we normally as humans have, and all of us do it, is that we can't see that because we're inside of it, and it isn't until it's outside of us and begins to cause problems in our lives that we're even able to see it. And sometimes we can't even see it then. We just know we're having problems and we need help. So this is why I encourage people to, search out videos like this one, try to find a therapist or a healer or a coach or someone that you feel like you resonate with. That's really the most important thing. They've proven time and again that relationship is far more important than credentials or really anything else. So keep that in mind if you're looking for somebody. So when those things don't get examined, we end up depressed. We end up with anxiety disorders and depression and failed relationships and just, unhappiness. That's the way it comes out. So I view depression, anxiety, anger, jealousy, all of those negative feelings, those are, to me, red flags. Those are the things that are saying, hey, something is wrong here. The thing that's wrong isn't the depression. The thing that's wrong is what's causing the depression. Most people will then say to me, oh, well, it was my childhood, or it was my mom, or well, right now, I don't have the job that I want. Okay, all of that stuff is probably true, but it's still not the root. It's not the cause. The cause is a belief that you're holding in your mind about yourself that is in direct conflict with the truth. And when that happens, we become anxious. We begin to have things like panic attacks happen. We begin to have digestive problems, and we're not sleeping well, and apathy sets in, and we don't know how to get out. We don't know how to get traction. The traction is about finding the belief. I did a walkthrough a few weeks ago video on how to find beliefs about ourselves. So you can go and look at that if you want to figure out how to get to the belief, or you can contact me. I can help you with it. But what people don't understand also, and in addition, is that this is kind of a process. So let's pretend like I know what it is that, like my childhood, I'll say my childhood is the reason why I am depressed. Okay, so if I believe that my childhood is the reason, and now I understand it's my responsibility to do something about that rather than sort of put it on everybody else to take care of, then what do? Well, is understanding it enough? I would argue no. I think that understanding it is very important. I think that walking through and processing it by yourself or with somebody else is vitally important. I don't think it's always necessary. I think there are certain modalities of therapy where you don't have to do that. I do one of them. It's called EMDR. That is a method you do not have to go back into the memories about. But I would say that for most people, most of the time, if it's an everyday occurrence, like I just had a fight with my boyfriend, or I had a fight with my best friend, or whatever, and I behaved poorly and I didn't like it, and I could tell that the way that I acted reminded me of the way that I acted during this time in my life, and that was really bad, and I want to fix it because I'm sick of doing this, then you need to look at it thoroughly. So, but moving on from that, looking at it means gaining awareness around how do I feel emotionally, how do I feel in my body when I'm doing this behavior or having this thought, what does it remind me of, where does it take me to, what is the outcome, what would I like to do differently. Most people across the board will say, I'd like to just feel indifferent. I'd like to just not be bothered by other people. And okay, I agree. I think that getting to a place of indifference is really, or not indifference, but where things don't bother you in the same way is really the goal. Okay, so the first thing that you do is you find awareness. You set an intention. I'm going to, I would like to have more awareness around the way that I feel before I get angry, before I raise my voice. And then make some sort of plan around it. So what I recommend and what I do myself is, if I do something or say something or act in some way that I do not like, that is old, that I've been carrying with me, that is not working anymore, I like to write it down. I like to say, this is the thing I'm doing, and I don't know why, and I want to understand it, and this is how I'm feeling, and this is what it reminds me of. And then I just leave it there. I don't need to do anything else in that moment. Because writing it down for me, because I'll write it down and then sort of leave it out so that I can see it. I'll walk by it several times a day. I think about it, whenever I pass it. Oh yeah. And so what that does is it creates more awareness in my everyday life. So maybe, I don't know, some weird Facebook thing goes, whatever. You know how did they say that in this tone or that tone? Because I'm going to be mad if they said it in this tone, but I'm not going to be mad if they said it in that tone. Where you feel a little bit of a similar feeling or something that's close. Oh, see, when you bring awareness to it, when you have it in the forefront of your mind to pay attention to, you'll notice when it comes up in these random times throughout the day. At the gas station when the guy did the thing, or on Facebook when that lady said blah blah blah. Those are 2 times today I noticed that I kind of had the beginning of that feeling. Okay, good. What is that? Okay, because we need to just put that down on that same piece of paper because somehow they're connected. Eventually, you'll be able to see patterns. You'll be able to see, okay, so there's something like the common denominator in all of these things is that I didn't feel like they understood me. This is one for me. When I feel like someone can't understand me, I know I've mentioned before I have ADHD, and so my brain works differently than other people's brains. And when I'm trying to understand something, I understand it differently. I also will explain it differently than most people. That's why this stuff is honestly, like, I'm floored that anybody can understand me in these videos, because my entire life that's been a thing for me, that like I go off on these tangents and whatever. And so people don't understand and they get confused. And when they get confused, my very first, I had this panic reaction, because throughout my entire life, if somebody didn't understand me, they might get angry, they might feel frustrated, they might walk away, they might say, well, you're not worth listening to. I mean, I don't know. There are a million fears around that, just based on experiences. And maybe not even experiences that were all that terrible. Just experiences that I don't want to have again. And so the immediate reaction when I can tell that someone doesn't understand is to feel a little bit of panic. Okay, well, if that's something that I'm just now becoming aware of, then it makes sense in these 6 or 7 scenarios over the course of the last few weeks why I felt similar things, or why I acted in this way that I don't like. And now you have this sort of picture. It's not clear exactly, but it's getting clearer, and you're beginning to understand. Okay, so you've got awareness around it a little bit. Now it's time to spend time with it. Now it's time to ask yourself, really, what am I afraid of? Am I afraid of people leaving and not wanting to hang out with me? Am I afraid of being ignored? Am I afraid of not being good enough? Am I afraid that I'm not lovable? That I'm not significant in any way? There are tons of those fears that we all have. All of us do. Okay, well, this place that I'm talking about right now, this is the surrender place. If you're going to move through something and have it change, you have to surrender to it. That is the thing most people are afraid of, because we anticipate that it's going to be awful. If I stop doing this thing, if I stop doing whatever it is, this thing that I have fear, around not being lovable, let's say, I've now learned that I act in this defensive way because I'm afraid that I'm not lovable. Well, how in the world am I going to be able to stop it unless I look at it? Like, okay, Angeline, let's sit with this. Are you unlovable? And then what will happen is your brain will begin, if you're sitting still and you have no distractions, and this is your goal, is surrender, then your brain will just sort of take you to all these places. You might remember a dozen or more situations in your life where everything is sort of tracking and you're sort of getting it in a different way. And you might feel, and then you remember the one that makes you start crying, or that makes you feel that pit in your stomach. And you begin to have more insight. And then you start to see how 8-year-old Angeline, or 13-year-old Angeline, or 16-year-old Angeline, really just felt like people didn't care about her, even though that was never the truth. But that's the way it felt because of, whatever. When you start to realize that and kind of have compassion, I have compassion for that younger version of myself that felt this way. then I can begin to, you can feel it in your body. You can feel it. I just saw a bruise on my hand. Look at that thing. I garden a lot. Maybe that's what it's from. That was ADHD right there. You begin to actually feel your body releasing. You can feel it like sort of sliding. You can feel something moving. The steps usually look like this. There's a vulnerability where you're allowing yourself to even think about this stuff. You're allowing yourself to be bare and open with yourself, no matter how bad it feels. You're open to it. It often involves reaching out to somebody else. It doesn't have to, but it often does. And that could look a lot of different ways. That could look like, wow, I'm just realizing this thing that I do, and it feels terrible. It could look like, hey, so the other day when I said the thing, how did it seem to you? Did it feel this way? Was I being this way? You know, just to sort of get more information and gather information about, you know, it's hard to know the way that people take us and the way that we seem. It could be reaching out to a therapist or another trusted person that you talk to. It could be reaching out to an ex and saying, I'm sorry. You know, it could mean reaching out to a friend, an old friend, and saying, I'm sorry. It could mean any of those things. But I think that there is an element of feeling badly that it looked that way, while also understanding that's just all you knew to do. So it's like this simultaneous, like, man, I really wish it hadn't happened that way, while having compassion for yourself that it did, because obviously there are reasons that it happened that way. We're all human. Being alone with it is that. So we go from vulnerability, reaching out, and then being alone with it. And that is the letting it settle in and feeling all of the feelings around it, until ultimately you can come to a place of gratitude. When you can come to a place where you go, that was quite literally the worst experience of my life, and I just cried a lot. That experience, back during the time when I actually created this neural pathway, you know. That was terrible. That was awful. And I'm really sorry that it happened that way. I really wish that I had known differently. I really wish that I had been able to do things differently, but I didn't have those tools at the time because of my age, or because of my the education that I had around emotional stuff, or a million reasons, because I was afraid. When we're afraid, we're not thinking clearly, and that's just the truth. That's just the way it is. But finding gratitude would look like, that stuff sucks, but man, I'm so grateful that it happened, because I was able to learn this thing and this thing, and they've been really important. Oh, and this other skill that I got. Some of our greatest teachers are the people who we believe have victimized us the most. People who have victimized us, not just that we believe have victimized us, but people who actually have. This group of people can be our greatest teachers. Another really good teacher are people, or other really good teachers are people that are in our life today that are patient with us during this process as we unlearn and unwind ourselves from all of the reasons that we do the things we do and the ways that we do them. Honoring that it's okay for somebody to be upset with you if you do something that sucks. Like that is reasonable. We want so badly to push people away that are mad at us, and to blame them, and to make it about them, and to make it us that's being victimized. But sometimes there's a reason. And even if there's not, other people get to have their own feelings just like we do. It's really tough sometimes to allow that. But I encourage each of you to just try as hard as you can to allow yourself to have the feelings that you have, and to allow other people to have the feelings that they have too. And when you can talk about things with them, and when they can talk with you about things too, that's going to make a really, really big difference. But you can't talk about that stuff until you start examining it in your life. And that's what people have got to get to. We've got to get to a place where we're not afraid to examine what comes up and why we feel a certain way. Every single thing in this life, every single thing in this world means something. Many people don't believe that, but I believe that. Every single thing, there's nothing without meaning. Every single thing means something. What is it? What if you took 5 seconds or 10 seconds to figure it out? Some things it doesn't matter, but those might be the best things to practice on, you know? You might get more insight about who you are as a human being when you stop and think, why am I craving a hot dog? I haven't had a craving for a hot dog in like 20 years. Why? As you're sitting there eating the hot dog in the park going, why am, like, this is really good. Why? I don't know. I feel like that is something actually that happened within the last couple of years to me. Like, I haven't wanted one of these in so long. Why? Why do I want one today? And I think that day, trying to remember, I remember that it was a sunny day. I feel like honestly, I think that the line that I ended up figuring out was I was missing my dad, and he died as I think he was 60 when he died. Pretty young, I think. And I was close to him coming up, and for whatever reason, like whether it was the smells or the sounds or the feeling of the day, I remember there was some connection to being a kid and having a hot dog with my dad, and I was missing him, and so that's what I did. But I didn't know it. I was operating on all of these things, the smells and the sounds and the feelings, without even knowing why. And that's what I mean. If you can take just a few minutes to figure out, to go through some of these processes and practice with things that are easy, you won't have as much trouble when they're hard. Also, I'll tell you that I have a product called Congruity. It's a bath salt. And it's one of the best things, I believe, to help you get through this process. If there's one of these processes that I need to go through, I'll put a tablespoon in my bath and lie there with my eyes closed until I figure it out, and it usually does not take long. Let's see. The devotion to figuring out the surrender and to getting to the surrender is so important. In my last video, I talked about nurturing ourselves and figuring out how to do that, and making a commitment to do that. And this is a time during the devotion piece, when you're figuring all this stuff out, when you're devoting yourself to giving yourself space to figure this stuff out, giving yourself time to cry, being okay with it, being okay with making mistakes, being okay with looking at yourself as a person who makes mistakes. Your devotion to that is going to do so much for you just engaging in the process at all. I've seen it happen a million times. I feel like it's like as soon as the devotion comes up, as soon as the person makes the decision in earnest to begin this process for themselves, what they find is there's this level of happiness, contentment. It feels fulfilling. And as they continue to do it, what you end up growing on accident is faith in yourself. And the more faith you have in yourself, and the more trust you have in yourself that you're going to take care of yourself, then the more you believe yourself. Does that make sense? The more that you believe yourself, the more you're willing to take chances, the more you're willing to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is how we connect to people. That's how we really connect with people, If you're not being vulnerable with someone, and they're not being vulnerable with you, you are not connecting. You're connecting on superficial stuff, on things that you both like this movie, you both like this color, you both like going to this place. Okay, that's great. But you're not connecting unless you're being vulnerable. So, I think that's where I'm going to stop. Awareness, willingness to go into surrender, devotion to the surrendering process, and then growth, Finding gratitude for all the lessons, even though some of them are going to look like difficult. In retrospect, I'm really grateful that I was raised in an evangelical Christian church, that the messages they send to people are very negative, and I was a child that was no exception. I was receiving these negative messages, and I believed them because I was a child. And for a long, long time, I was very angry because I do in earnest feel that many of the practices are abusive to children, and I felt very angry about it for a long time, and I let that group of people shape my spiritual life because I was so unwilling to even engage in spirituality because of my experience with this church. Being willing to look at all of that stuff and find the lessons, though. Here are some of the lessons I got. Nobody defines spirituality but me, for me. That's a lesson I learned from them. I learned not to believe everything that someone says, ever. Just, we're all looking through our own filters. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying they're bad people. I think that all those people many of them have very good intentions. But they're looking through their own filters just like me. They don't get to make the rules for me. And I'm not ever going to believe someone 100% in that regard again, just because of the filters thing. I learned that community is important. I learned how to stand up for things even though it was an unpopular opinion, because they taught me that. I learned how nice it is to have many, many people you can count on. As a child, and probably as an adult. I would imagine that as an adult it's nice to have that church family too. I don't know what it was like for my parents. I was looking at it, from my little kid perspective, which was, it was nice to have adults that cared about me, or at least listened to me and were helpful to me if I needed them in my life. So there are a lot of things I learned. Not all of them were bad, but I can find those and feel true gratitude because I've done all of the examining and I have awareness around it and I've surrendered to it. Once I surrendered to all of the anger and the resentment that I had and was able to release that stuff, because when you surrender to it, it releases. You don't have to do anything. It just does. It makes room, it leaves your body. I often say that when you're crying, you're making room in your body, quite literally, for new stuff to come in. And so don't be afraid of crying. That is a form of release, and it's very effective. If you're crying, good. Let yourself cry. You're making room, and you need room. You need room to let that stuff go and allow new things in. We all do. Be kind to yourselves, please. Be willing to go through this process. Talk about it with other people. Be vulnerable. Email me or, message me if you have questions, about surrender. I'm going to be talking a lot about surrender. That's something that has come up for me for a long time. And here we are. We're at this time where many of us are being pushed to a point where we need to surrender, and we are. It's scary for a lot of us. It's scary for all of us. The anticipation, the anticipatory grief, or the anticipatory pain. It's like my little 5-year-old who, whenever he hurts himself, he's like, I don't want to look. Does it have blood on it? He's afraid of blood. And I'm like, it doesn't have blood. It's okay. No, are you sure it doesn't have blood? He's so afraid to look. He is not even noticing that he doesn't feel it. It's not hurting. He's just so afraid of the anticipation, right? The anticipation is causing all of this fear. We're no different. We do exactly the same thing. Be kind to yourself. Allow yourself the ability to surrender. Be okay with it. And move on. Create lightness in your life. Create open space. Create the ability and the willingness to be still. Have a relentless approach to this. Someone years ago called me tenacious. I have a tenacity around this stuff, and it's true, I do. If I find something that is not serving me, I do not want it. I want it out. And sometimes my fear around getting it out can paralyze me, which makes everything stop. My whole life stops. I feel sad. I feel anxious. I have trouble sleeping, all of those things. Until I say, Angelin, we're done with this. You're just going to do it, because it's like I can split. It's like I hear myself going, I'm sick of not sleeping. You're going to get this out today. In any case, thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, again, please do contact me. You can find me at colorofkismet.com. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram, also at Color of Kismet. Or you can comment here. Thanks a lot for listening. My name's Angelin Nicholson, and I will see you soon.